Hello and thank you for tuning in to another mini tutorial from Upvc Spares for Repairs. Today we're going to try and explain how you would approach opening a locked window where the mechanism has failed. Having unscrewed the handle, we can now remove it. So we can see that the spindle is still attached. So now as we push this sash to try to open, we've identified that it still remains in the locked position. So that's where we were. That was where it started. So now what we'll do is investigate now the remainder of this window sash to see exactly what we need to do to get it to open. Firstly, once we know that it's still locked, one of the things we always recommend is that you remove the beads around the sash and remove the glass. We've already got the glass out of this one, but the beads are still in. But the reason for that is because we are going to need a little bit of flexibility to be able to move this plastic around to enable us to get more of a movement on the mechanism. It will help, so that's one of the things we always recommend. And there's nothing worse than having a go at repairing something and breaking the glass in doing it. So if we take the glass out, put it on one side, safe. Here we can see now that we've removed all the glazing beads, and that has now exposed the glazing cavity, which is where we're going to start and do some measuring and some work to try to identify where best to drill through to be able to move the mechanism below. And we'll explain that now in a little bit more detail. So what we're hoping is that if you've got another window in your property of the same type that was installed around about the same time, then if you go to that window and open it as it should do, you're going to be able to identify the distance from the inside edge of the opening sash back to the centre of the actual mechanism that wraps around the underside or the side of the window. That is the centre of what's called the Euro groove. What we would normally do in those circumstances is we would use our square measure and we would place it onto the sash and get the centre of the ruler to the centre of the Euro groove. That now is a dimension that we can transfer because we've got it here, solid. And we can use that now to be able to go back to the window that hasn't been able to open. And now we just got to use a little bit of imagination. There we go. Now we're back to the window that wouldn't open. And if you come round this side with the camera and go down into the glazing chamber, we now transfer that dimension by placing it here, and with a pencil you mark the position thus. And now you can see that we've got the pencil position, and we know from this side through the glazing chamber that we know exactly the centre. Then we move forward in terms of accessing what we need to release this window. There are many different and varied types of mechanisms that are used on window opening sashes. This one in particular is a Mako system. Mako is a fairly popular one, and invariably most of them operate in a similar fashion. In other words, the locking bolt that slides along runs along the back of the main plate. So what we're aiming to try to do is get access to this by drilling through the opening sash. So exposing that, we need a 10mm drill bit, which we will show you where you want to put that. And bear in mind, you've got slots and a slightly slimmer piece here. So we'll be aiming to go in somewhere around this area with a 10mm hole. So working from the inside now, you've got to imagine that this is sitting just past the edge of this frame here, and we're aiming to try and get to somewhere within that area, avoiding where we can this, because we can't put anything in to move anything, because of course there's a slot rather than solid. So what we would usually advise would be to start with that position here. We got that? Yep. And we'll start with a pilot hole of 4mm. So we'll get the drill set up now and pop that hole through. Just to explain, we're using a particular device here that will drill at 90 degrees. This is because the height of this opening here, where the glass would normally sit, is too short for us to be able to put this drill bit straight into the end of the drill, because it will not fit, and it will hit either the top of the window or the reveal above it. So this is why we're using this one. If you'd got the mechanism down the side of the window and it wasn't narrow, then clearly an ordinary drill with a drill bit out of the front of it would work perfectly well. So what we'll do is we'll drill the pilot hole now. You want to work on that one? Right, that's that 4mm pilot hole drilled. And now we'll swap the bit out for our 10mm. But just to point out at this juncture, if we discover as we progress that a single hole is not adequate to be able to make us enough room to be able to rock backwards and forwards with the implement we're going to use to try to move the mechanism, then clearly we will need to elongate this hole by drilling 2 holes at the side of one another. But if we have to get to that stage, it will explain itself a little bit further on in this video. In these circumstances, we've discovered that it's usually better to use what's called a stepped cone bit, which allows you to regulate the size of the hole dependent on how far through you're able to take this bit. And that's again because the 10mm bit is usually quite long. So we'll drill this now and transfer to you, Lorraine. So now we've got a 10mm hole, but it's only in this side of the profile. So now we're going to have to open up inside in the other side of the profile to get another 10mm hole further in. Once you've opened up the hole with the cone bit, we usually would recommend that you go through the second layer of PVC to be able to expose the metalwork below by going in with a 10mm bit, but this time maybe just because it's only plastic you're going through, you can rotate it by hand or use a pair of mole grips to hold it to be able to turn the drill bit, which will then open the 10mm area for both the first layer that you've drilled along with the second layer below. So as you can see looking down the hole now, there's the 4mm hole that we drilled right at the beginning where we were putting the pilot hole through. We've taken that into the back of the metalwork, and now we offer a 3mm Allen key into here, and you push the mechanism over. using that Allen key and remove it, and then theoretically what should happen? It opens. Now, just to point out, it may be that the box, the centre box in this window, has malfunctioned on one side and not on the other. So therefore, it could open like we've demonstrated. However, it may be that you've got to repeat this whole exercise once more at the other side to enable you to release both pins from both sides of the opening sash. So clearly, having produced this hole, particularly if it's a bottom opening window and the mechanism is at the base of the window frame, then clearly this wants just covering and coating over with silicone. And the aim of the exercise is to prevent any dampness that gets past the gaskets on the window frame that would normally sit in here. We don't want it to get through and into the mechanism to make the mechanism rust. So just as a belt and braces, a nice blob of silicone, and then maybe your glass packer can go over the top. But do allow enough space for water to travel across here, because these slots at either side are essential for draining the water out of the window. When you've finally got the mechanism out of the window, then of course it's time to turn to us to help. So if you either email a photograph of what you've discovered or something like that to our email address info@upvcsparesforrepairs.co.uk, then we'll come back to you and tell you what we can do to help. I'd like to thank you so much for watching the video. We hope that it's given you all the ideas you need to release a window frame when the window is locked. If you have any problems, by all means send us an email on UPVC Spares for Repairs. And just to let you know, today this is our 101st video for you to enjoy. Thank you once more. Goodbye.